So
We're going.
all right.
Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We are going to have our inaugural in-person session since COVID is over. We are at the annual California State Athletic Directors Association Conference in San Diego, California. And we are with John Radcliff, former State Athletic Director of the Year. We don't remember which year, but it was recently.
Section, not state.
Well, you deserve to be the State Athletic Director of the Year, so we're going to call it that. But anyway, John Radcliff, he is the Athletic Director at Greenfield High School and the varsity girls basketball coach. Appreciate having you here today.
Thank you, Justin.
So let's just figure out how you ended up being an athletic director, being a coach, being at Greenfield pretty much since its inception, it would seem. And take us through that journey after you got out of school and how you ended up doing what we're doing now.
Oh, wow. So graduated from college, got my credential and moved to the burgeoning metropolis of Greenfield at the ripe old age of 22 to teach sixth grade math and science. And that year they needed a co-ed softball coach. And so that was my first coaching gig.
And when you say co-ed, like at the high school or at the middle school?
This is at the middle school.
Okay.
So this is before the high school was even built. Did this at the middle school. At the time, it was like, hey, I know something about this. This is going to be fun. Did the co-ed softball thing. Next year, they needed a volleyball coach. So coach volleyball the following year. And then following year, they needed a girls basketball coach. And that's where I got my start in coaching girls basketball. So great group of kids, still have contact and relationships with some of these kids from that first team I coached way back when. Great athletes. We had very successful seasons. Those kids went on to win championships down in King City playing with King Klein. And
that's because at that time there was no Greenfield High School and all the Greenfield kids went to school in King City.
Correct. And so we bust our kids down there. Made a conscientious decision to try to leave Greenfield to get to a high school. And it's just kind of a different place to live. And now ground is broken on Greenfield High School, and I got involved with some of the ideas of what was going to go on at the school, a couple of years before it was built, and got to know the principal, who was hired well in advance. And one day it was October '98. We were already supposed to be open, and it didn't work out due to construction delays. And he's like, "Hey, I need an athletic director. You think you want to do this?" So I'm like, thought about it. I'm like, yeah, I know nothing about this, but I want to do this. And so that's where that all started. I think I was given a $225,000 budget to buy all of the equipment and uniforms and everything we would need to start an athletic program. 2 coaches were already hired for me, and it was a matter of finding enough people to fill the rest of the positions.
So interesting segue into what I traditionally ask next, which is when you first got into the seat of being the head coach, or in this case, the athletic director seat, what is it that you still needed to figure out? And you pretty much already said, I have no idea what I'm doing. If you had to go back in a time machine and give yourself advice at that time as a 20 plus year athletic director, now, if my math is right, 23, 24, what would you say are the things that you have to figure out when you first sit down in that chair?
I think it's a 3-year process. The first year was ignorance was bliss. You didn't know what you didn't know. You just kind of rolled with the punches. And, LG Belizio was a phenomenal individual to work with. Very encouraging, very supportive. From early on, he's like, John, you got to get your CAA. And did some of that stuff in Palm Springs first year out, and took the legal liability classes, which I think scares the heck out of everybody. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of an eye-opening thing, because that was spring. It's like, okay, I need to modify some of the things we're doing. The second year was, okay, let's improve upon the things that we know we didn't do well the first time around. And the third year, the bumps tend to mellow out even more. Unfortunately, I don't think enough athletic directors these days stick with the job long enough to get to the point where they're comfortable with what they need to be doing. So
Why do you think that is in regards to, you've been doing this for 23 years. I think 5 years in and not in any hurry to do something differently, but we just attended a session this morning of probably 140 new athletic directors at this convention this year alone. Why do you think people don't hang around very long?
It's a tremendous drain on your time. I think half of the job is knowing the rules and regulations of your district and your league and your section. And then there's a big chunk of your job, which is wrapped up within not only your school community, but the community in which your school is located. I'm on call 6 days a week, be it van keys or what's going on at the school. I live in the community, so I live 2 minutes away from the school. If you offer a full slate of sports, you're on call all the time. And some people just do not wish to live that way, I think is what it boils down to. I look at it, I see teachers that come to work at the contracted time of 7:45 and leave at the contracted time of 3:15. And we're compensated the same. There's some people that just don't tick that way. I've always been kind of a crazy workaholic, put in the time, do what it takes to get something done.
Yeah, and I would say most of our colleagues that, I don't want to even say find success, but find the least amount of resistance and things that create misery are the ones that are wired that way. Like, it doesn't bother us to get the call late at night. It's, there's almost we thrive on chaos mentality that goes along with that is almost stimulating.
Yeah, I just keep adding more. I'm finally at the age now where I'm looking at trying to remove some things from the plate, but I piled it on early on. I remember distinctly a principal sitting me down late 90s saying, "Hey, you really need to slow down." I was single, working, it's all I did was work. Earn a few extra bucks to go fishing down in Mexico in the summer, and that was life, repeat process. So there's a conscientious decision on my part trying to remove some things. It just takes longer. It's amazing. Now in my early 50s, this last basketball season took 4 to 6 weeks just to get to the point where I didn't feel exhausted.
Yeah, for sure. As the AD, how would you say your approach to the job has changed over the 20 plus years? And how would you say the job itself has changed over those 20 years?
I think I've always seen myself as a support role. Find a way to say yes. The coach is not asking you for something for the sake of asking. They have a need for what they're asking for. Find a way, make it work. We need to raise money, we can raise money. Change policy. Let's get it done. And I think that's been consistent throughout my time. As I am now the old guy. Before I was the young guy working with older coaches. Now I'm the old guy working with younger coaches. I think, there's much more of a mentorship role that I'm playing as an AD now, especially with most of my coaching staff being alumni. So I had these men and women, boys and girls as students and athletes back in the day. And so that's been kind of neat to see that come full circle. The amount of paperwork definitely has increased. Rules and regulations, a lot more stuff coming down from CIF, transfer stuff. Before you could ask a kid, why are you at Greenfield High School? I moved here. Oh, who'd you live with? They name their family. Who do you live with now? Name your family. You could okay, you're eligible. Now it's still a process of all the paperwork and contacting former schools and tracking kids.
In regards to your additional hat that you wear as, and you can give the correct title here, but being the leader or the head of the district contract negotiating team for the teachers union, What insight has that given you into doing your professional job of overseeing athletics? How has that informed, how have they informed one another?
I think it's been an interesting, hand in hand position, because you can't really successfully negotiate the financial piece for all of the teachers without knowing what the complete picture of the district finances are. And so I feel supported as the athletic director with release time recently. I mean, I went 10, 11 years teaching 7 periods a day with no release time, to now I have 4 periods of release time. We can't go out and buy everything new every year, but financially we're supported. It has led to challenges where I think I could have improved the job and the time allocated to the athletic director, but I didn't feel right doing that because at the time it affected one bargaining unit member, and that was me, because the AD at King City was a walk-on. So, there's been times where I've had to kind of pass on improving the position because I just didn't feel right doing it. But it's been an interesting, I think everybody needs to, ADs who are having budget issues, I think, get involved. If you're in a collective bargaining situation, not necessarily a private place, but definitely public education, know what the district finances are, know where it's going.
Yeah, it's funny because my first 2 years as a teacher, so I'm 23, 24, whatever it was, you got an extra like bargaining unit for like sitting on the union team. And so like my first 2 years, like I was at those meetings, I didn't know what the hell was going on, but it was fascinating to look behind the curtain and trying to figure out how to navigate some of the challenges that are inherent to the job, especially in a public school versus a private school where I may want to do something and there's not a lot of red tape, but it's your place, there is. What would you say is the most challenging hurdle facing you in making what many of us would consider logical changes and improvement, but the bureaucracy gets in the way based on either ed code, district policy, whatever those things are? What's something that you've been wrestling with that you finally found success by being creative or just being patient?
Concession stand. I would say that anybody who's been to Greenfield High School since we opened, you come to a football game, you walk in the stadium, and the first thing you notice is there's a row of porta potties because there's no bathrooms in our stadium, nor is there a concession stand. We have a storage facility that has no running water nor electricity. We use a generator and we haul everything in and out on Friday night to make it work, to raise money to support the athletic programs. So 24 years later, 24 years into this school, we've got a permanent bathroom concession stand that is supposed to be in for this graduation. So that's just kind of being a persistent pain. We know we need to do this, but we don't have the money. Well, now we have the money. So I think getting that done correctly, that's a big piece. Still trying to find creative solutions to dugouts and press boxes and things like that. Going through the DSA process is timely and expensive. Some schools just get it done and the district looks the other way. I do not have that luxury.
Right. And when you say DSA process, what is that acronym?
Department of State Architecture. So it has to be approved. And if it's not approved, then you can run into some serious fines and ripping things out. For example, we had when we first opened up, the kids who came to Greenfield High School for the first few years, we had a dirt track. We had portable bleachers that sat on the track for football. At the time, we had some developer fees that they utilized to install concrete bleachers that are there now. And we had to get a variance because we didn't have the $250,000 to put in this 7 switchback wheelchair ramp to allow somebody to access the top of the stadium where a press box would be.
Mhm.
So we cannot install a press box because we have no way to get a wheelchair up there.
Right.
And so those are some of the trade-offs that you have when you have an underfunded school construction project.
Right.
It seems like they're always underfunded. They always cost more than what they pass the bond for.
Yes, and let's call it laws are changing at such a rapid pace that maybe when you did the blueprints for the project and then the accessibility things came in, it's like, what do we do? This is what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been one of the more frustrating things.
Yeah.
Let's go back in time and let's pass the bond for more money,
Right,
and build it right.
yeah, absolutely. Interesting. Let's pivot to your coaching hat. You won your first league title this year.
Hey man, losing as coach in Monterey County history,
There you
sitting
go.
right in front of you.
Well, it doesn't mean you haven't been successful. Let's talk about what that journey was like. And after 25 years of doing this, how would you put your finger on, this is the best thing we do in this program that has created the culture I want, the continuity that I want, even though, even the student body is sometimes discontinuous. But if you were to walk away and go somewhere else, regardless of the demographic that you are now coaching, like, we are going to do this and here's why.
It just starts on a matter of respecting the kids. I mean, when you pack up and go somewhere new, if as the adult I left to go somewhere else, there's a complete rebuilding of your identity. And that's not something I've had to deal with. I mean, I've been in one place.
Mhm.
Kids tend to know who you are and what they're getting when they walk in. I would say that my basketball kids know a side of me that most of the people I work with don't. I think I come across as this intimidating, scary, hard to approach guy that, my basketball girls definitely see a different side of that. So it's been an interesting thing. I really value the ongoing lasting relationships I have with former players. Coaching to me is a way of giving back, especially to the female population in a predominantly Hispanic community. I've dealt with kids in the past, earlier in my coaching career, where the girls were phenomenal athletes. The brothers not so much, and the brothers could play whatever they want, and the girls had to go home. And that really wasn't fun to deal with. And so just kind of, allowing these young ladies to, be empowered by participating in athletics. I mean, that's been one of the more rewarding things.
So how do you then, as you describe that culture and that situation, go about recruiting your campus? I don't want to use the word convincing, but encouraging and getting participation from a group that isn't necessarily always permitted or interested in playing interscholastic sports. How have you done that, and how has that changed over the 25 years you've been there?
I think one of the more challenging things was recruiting enough girls to play field hockey. Looking at the Title IX numbers, and football kind of skewed the boys' side up, and it was like, hey, it's time to add a girls' sport. Let's see if we can drum up support for girls. And my soccer kids tended not to do anything but soccer. It's like, okay, strategically, they understand the game of field hockey. It's very similar strategy. It's different equipment. Really, really appreciate, Paul at Catalina. Paul's like, hey, come pick up some stuff. And so I went over, and he gave me a bunch of gear and brought it down, and here you go. This is what it's all about. Come out and, kind of open playground with field hockey stuff, and got a team going. And, that's still a continual walking around at lunch, with gear and kids, and hey, come out and play. It's fun. And we've been able to field 2 teams, but it's work as opposed to something like basketball in Greenfield. A lot of kids play it from an early age. It's indoors. I mean, the wind is horrendous for those of you who don't live there or spend a lot of time there. you know, it's kind of hard to play something like volleyball or tennis outside because the wind blows so hard. So, you know, we tend to get a lot of kids coming out for basketball. It's not, don't need to recruit a whole lot.
Right. Well, I think it's funny you mentioned field hockey, because I run into the same thing on our campus where our kids participation is obligatory. And so they're going to do something, and they sign up for volleyball, they sign up for tennis, they sign up for golf. And it's like, if you've never played, you're not making our golf team. You're not making our tennis team. If you are willing to give it a shot and you have a pulse and you are alive, like, you'll make the field hockey team. Like, come on up. But nobody knows what field hockey is on the West Coast. It's not a sport that is prevalent around us, at least. I think we're now down to 10 teams total, right? And then globally, it's a male sport. So it's like you have this weird collision of lack of knowledge and fear of trying something new. And if once you get the kids out there, they usually love it. And it's like you said, I always joke, soccer, lacrosse, basketball, water polo is the same as field hockey. You just have a different implement. And so it's funny that you tell that story. On the coaching side of things, as the athletic director, you're obviously responsible for all of the programs. You not only supervise your own teams, but administrate your sports as they go to other schools, and you get to see what else is going on. And I'm always curious, what have you observed, watched, learned, watching non-basketball coaches and teams that you have been able to steal and implement as a basketball coach?
Ooh. I'm thinking there.
And while you're thinking, the reason I always ask this, and usually I'm in my office recording these things, but my office looks out on the pool. And so I watch water polo practice, and like, it's the same game as hoops. It's just, you know, in a different medium. And so the water polo coach and I are always talking. My assistant ADs, our head lacrosse coach, we're always talking. That's the same game. And it's like, what are you doing to get this done? And then go try to use it in our sport. But often we get tunnel vision, right? And we're in this echo chamber of, oh, I have to go talk to another basketball coach to figure out how to guard a pick and roll. And it's like, actually, no, you don't. Like, go see what they're doing over here.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I know, I think some of this, you know, Tim McCarthy, you know, he used to ask a question, what would it look like for you to be coached by you?
Mm-hmm.
You know, would you like that? And, you know, a lot of times I'm looking at how adults interact with their student athletes. And
Right.
I really like this. I really like that. I don't so much like this.
Mm-hmm.
Am I like that?
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to change this? I think one thing, you know, I've mellowed considerably as a coach. You know, I have my former athletes go, well, why don't you yell at them like you yelled at us? And I was like, I just can't. I'm not there. I'm not there anymore.
Right.
So there's been, you know, that evolution. But little ideas that it's kind of hard to articulate. You know, it's just a tool bag, and you throw out the ones you don't use, and you add the ones that you think are going to work. You know, like me, I had to do a little homework this year because I had two big girls. I've never had two big girls. So, you know, there's a lot of things that you could do that, you know, playing small ball all the time that, you know, hey, let's go to town and try some different things.
Which in today's era of basketball, if done well, actually gives you an advantage because everybody else is going the other direction.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that you bring that up, because often, and I'm guilty of it for sure, it's like, this is how we play. And like, we're going to fit the pieces into this no matter what it takes. And so to be able to reinvent yourself in that way is one of those tools. How would you say, as an advice giver in this situation with 25 years of experience and in a league of 32 of us, or however many schools we have where we talk a lot, you have found to be the best way to approach the difficult conversations you often have to have with coaches about either decision making in regards to not filling out paperwork or things you've observed in their coaching approach that aren't necessarily wrong, but from the experienced seat could be done differently to achieve a greater result. How have you found is the best way to navigate those? And I understand it's different based on the personality and the relationship you have with those coaches, but are there a few kind of tactile pieces of advice that you could share that it's like, hey, these are the things you have to do, because if not, this is what's going to happen?
I think the biggest piece of that is being invisible by being highly visible. I mean, you were there so much that you're just there. You know, I walk through practices pretty much daily if I'm on campus. You're just a piece standing there observing what's going on. You know, coach asks you, what do you think? You can give them feedback then. When you're not there, it's really hard to give that feedback. So maybe that would be a piece of advice that I would give new ADs. Yeah, you're buried in paperwork. Put it down. You know, take some sanity break. Go out and walk through practice for 45 minutes, you know, after warm-ups are done, and see what's going on and see what your coaches are doing. And, you know, it's a skill development that they're working on for the day. And, you know, it gives you a much better idea about why they're asking for equipment and what's going on with the overall program and what you would expect to see, you know, attitudinally at games, and which kids you might need to keep an eyeball on and maybe have a chat with.
In that, as you observe these things, as you're working on your coaching yourself, as you're trying to constantly grow all of your coaches as leaders, all of your student athletes as leaders, is there a particular challenge or failure that you've experienced during your time in your coaching role, in your athletic director role, in your teaching role, that has been the most informative for you finding success as a result of that moment?
I think one thing that sticks with me is, you know, had a phenomenal young man that went to UCLA for track and field, and I am super frustrated. We had a really good track team, but we didn't have a lot of kids at practice, and it was a struggle to get kids to come to practice. They didn't want to work hard, and I was venting frustration one day, and Joel very quietly and calmly said, "Coach, don't yell at us. We're here." You're absolutely right. And I am sorry. I am just so frustrated. And that was, you know, interesting. You know, how many times I had done that over the years. But I still carry that with me. I run into Joel at a wedding, you know, well over 10 years after he graduated, and I shared that with him. I'm like, you know, that's something I've always carried with me.
And that's almost like when we're coaching basketball and we're frustrated with someone on the court and we turn and holler at the bench. It's like, we're not even in. Like, why are you telling us? For when you get in. It's like, no, talk to the guys that are doing it. I love that story. That's funny. All right, this question's a little bit out of the box because it doesn't really apply to anything that we've been talking about theoretically. It can if you want to make it do so, but you and I both ride our bikes, and I was out in the Carmel Valley and I listened to this podcast called Coaching for Leaders with Dave Stachowiak, and he always finishes with this question, which is, what have you most recently changed your mind on? And I rode back home, walked into the house, and like, my wife and daughter are there. I'm like, what have you most recently changed your mind on? What the hell are you talking about? And it's like, you know, as you're constantly trying to grow and evolve, part of that is challenging your beliefs, right? And I took the question in that frame. So it's like, how are we constantly challenging our beliefs? So when we find some reason to change them, that we're willing to do so, right? And so I asked that question in the same sense. Hey, I used to be over here, and now I'm over here, and here's why. And it can be about anything, but something like you can just think about recently that I was like, yeah, actually, this is it.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind when you ask me that question is, something that I know about me is when I get passionate about something. If you're not on my side, you probably absolutely just cannot stand the tone of voice that I'm using at that particular moment in time. It definitely have tonal issues. I mean, that's something that I realized that needed work. I was listening to a podcast, and it was an interesting piece of advice that the guy said, "Hey man, just pretend like it's your late night FM DJ voice," which is probably going to bug the heck out of people too. But if you're sitting in the room and and you're like, "Oh man, Radcliff's gonna just lose it here," and you hear just the chill tone, it's a realization that it's not always the best way to approach things. I'm typically very passionate about what I do. If you're on my team, you're on my team. And if you're not, you probably don't like me.
And often, because I run into that as well, it's usually due to some perception by the other person and a lack of understanding of who you are at your core and what your value system is in regards to, like, look, we're gonna do what's best for kids here, and I'm gonna stand up and be the squeaky wheel when I have to, because someone's got to say it. And how has that both served and inhibited you over the years, not from achieving your goals, but potentially achieving outcomes that are best for kids, but you've had to be creative in a solution to make sure that the point is heard?
For me, some of this stuff is really highly uncomfortable, because if you left me alone, I'm the dude even today that would be sitting in the back of the room, not interacting a whole lot, not saying a whole lot. But I guess sticking up for kids and some of the things that I believe in education have allowed me to use my voice. And it's not always comfortable. I still don't particularly enjoy addressing a room full of adults. Kids, no problem. Adults, still uncomfortable. That's just never was in my DNA. It's been outside my comfort zone forever. But I would say that would be the one thing, addressing that discomfort of speaking up and doing it anyways.
Let's wrap with this. As we mentioned when we opened the conversation, we're at the California State Athletic Directors Conference, and there's an early bird day. Today is the actual beginning of the conference. There were some other courses and things that we could have gone to, and some sessions that we both were here for. But what is something that you've gained from being here, very specifically just this year, that was enough already just after the 48 hours you've been here, without even getting to the meat of the conference yet, that would lead you to recommend to anybody listening to this, get involved and go to these sessions so that you can continue to grow as either an administrator or a coach or a teacher or whatever hat you happen to wear?
There are so many different perspectives and points of view that you can experience at one of these things. You can take something away. I mean, I've come to more of these than I haven't, because my time as an AD. For me, this particular time around, I felt like I needed to get some information on esports. So I had a great conversation with the esport people that are here, and also the unified athletics. I think that's something that would help our student population out. We have a fairly robust group of regular ed kids, and it's called Circle of Friends, and they basically go in and spend time with our special needs kids. And I think that there would be a following for bringing some of those athletic pieces back so it was a good opportunity to gather some information for that as well.
Awesome episode. Thanks for being here and taking the time out of our busy schedule to sit down and conduct the first in-person interview on the show.
Thank you, Justin.